I want your best game.
It's not a game, it's chance.
I've played 4 times. I'm alive. It's not chance, Mr. Holmes, it's chess.
This singular sequence in a desolate classroom does more than solve a murder. It acts as a merciless psychological stress test for the modern hero, exposing the terrifying reality that his greatest weapon, his towering intellect, is entirely compromised by his addiction to risk, and proving that logic, devoid of humanity, is effortlessly weaponized by those with nothing to lose. Prior to this encounter, Sherlock Holmes operated with absolute impunity, treating the London police force with deep contempt and viewing the city's populace as hopelessly ordinary. However, he has been completely outmaneuvered by Jeff Hope, a terminally ill cabbie who leverages the sheer social invisibility of the service sector to navigate the city unseen. Transported away from institutional protection, Sherlock arrives at the stark, utilitarian confines of the Roland Kerr Further Education College. Here, the acoustic emptiness of the hard wooden classroom creates an isolated vacuum, a nice, quiet spot for a murder where technology and forensic data cannot save him. The power dynamic has already inverted before they even take their seats. The master deducer is now the subject of deduction, forced into a psychological arena by an adversary who considers himself an absolute intellectual equal.
You're the one who's going to die here.
No, I'm not.
That's what they all say.
The cabbie immediately seizes control of the psychological frame by presenting Sherlock's death as an established, inevitable fact. This initiates the procedural of the mind, bypassing physical violence to attack Sherlock's fundamental belief in his own invulnerability. Sherlock's flat, almost childlike denial exposes his profound intellectual vanity. He literally cannot process a reality where a seemingly mundane working-class driver outwits him. The cabbie's dismissive retort categorizes Sherlock not as a genius, but merely as the latest victim in an ongoing, predictable behavioral pattern. The physical blocking of the scene visually manifests the architecture of a simultaneous move game. By setting the table, the cabbie dictates the exact parameters of the engagement. Director Paul McGuigan strips away the distracting gimmickry of the episode's earlier pacing, utilizing static medium shots to emphasize that the true action here is not kinetic, but entirely cognitive. The cabbie is constructing a Hobbesian chessboard, isolating them in a controlled environment where intellect is the only currency.
Bit risky, wasn't it?
You call that a risk? Nah. This is a risk.
This is a highly targeted psychological strike against Sherlock's core addiction to danger, which mimics the physiological kick of drug use. The cabbie realizes that threatening Sherlock with the law is useless. He must threaten him with the ultimate game. He's taken a little pill bottle from his pocket, now sets it on the table between them. It's exactly the same as the pill bottles we've seen before. He's set down a second identical bottle, the same in every detail. The introduction of the identical bottles visually establishes the poison pill dilemma, effectively neutralizing Sherlock's primary advantage. There are no microscopic clues, no soil samples, and no linguistic tells to analyze. The physical symmetry of the bottles forces Sherlock out of forensic science and into a dark, psychological arena of behavioral game theory. The stark visual contrast and lack of on-screen text graphics highlight that Sherlock is cut off from his usual data streams, completely immersed in a terrifyingly analog trap.
You take the pill from the good bottle, you live. Take the pill from the bad bottle, you die.
Both bottles are, of course, identical.
Sherlock's curiosity inevitably overrides his survival instinct, compelling him to engage with the mechanics of the trap. The binary rules, life versus death, establish a formal zero-sum game where the mathematical expected payoff is a flat if played honestly. By vocalizing that the bottles are identical, Sherlock verbally concedes that his traditional deductive faculties are utterly useless here, plunging him into an agonizing state of uncertainty.
In every way.
And you know which is which?
Of course I know.
But I don't.
Wouldn't be a game if you knew. You're the one who chooses.
The cabbie wields information asymmetry as his primary weapon. By forcing Sherlock to make the active choice, the cabbie maintains his twisted assertion that he does not physically murder his victims. He merely manipulates their minds until they kill themselves. This elevates the act of murder from physical brutality to a pure linguistic and psychological domination, perfectly aligning with Sherlock's own belief that the mind is the only true battlefield. Why should I? I've got nothing to go on. What's in it for me? I haven't told you the best bit yet. Whatever bottle you choose, I take a pill from the other one, and then together we take our medicine. Sherlock scrambles for a rational exit strategy, demanding a logical motivation to participate. The cabbie's revelation that he will also consume a pill shatters the conventional serial killer paradigm, elevating the conflict to a suicidal pact of intellectual supremacy. This demonstrates a terrifying, nihilistic commitment, proving to Sherlock that he is facing a man with a nothing-to-lose philosophy, against which pure, self-preserving logic is completely insufficient. Sherlock's visible surprise is a critical breach of his stoic facade. The cabbie's malevolent smile underscores the shift toward 21st century nihilism. There is no tragic romanticism here, only a dark, mercenary thrill. The cabbie's strict adherence to the rules of not cheating reveals that he views himself as an honorable player operating within a twisted, self-contained moral universe, seeking to beat Sherlock fairly to validate his own genius.
It's a game of chess with one move and one survivor. And this is the move.
The cabbie explicitly reframes the encounter from random probability to deterministic strategy. By invoking chess, he asserts a terrifying mastery over the psychological patterns and predictable behaviors of his victims. The physical sliding of the pill acts as the opening salvo, initiating immense psychological pressure. The stillness of the static camera work emphasizes the gravity of this one-move chess game, requiring absolute cognitive focus. The cabbie masterfully plunges Sherlock into a paralyzing, recursive logic loop, forcing him to continually second-guess the self-preservation instincts of a suicidal man. The cabbie's dark humor, verging on nice, is a deliberate tactic to normalize the grotesque stakes and maintain emotional dominance. He is exploiting Sherlock's agonizing intolerance for uncertainty, weaponizing the puzzle itself to induce analysis paralysis.
Ready to play?
Play what? It's a 50-50 chance.
You're not playing the numbers, you're playing me.
Sherlock clings to mathematical logic as a desperate defense mechanism against the chaos of human psychology. However, the cabbie correctly diagnoses that in a game of deception, numbers are entirely irrelevant. Survival depends entirely on an emotional and psychological read of the opponent. This directly challenges Sherlock's intellectual shield of high-functioning sociopathy, forcing him to engage with the messy reality of human motivation he usually disdains.
4 people in a row, it's not chance.
Luck.
It's genius. Everyone's so stupid, even you.
The cabbie claims a level of metacognitive mapping that directly rivals Sherlock's own mental processing. By explicitly calling Sherlock stupid, he delivers a surgical strike at the detective's most vulnerable pressure point, his vanity. The cabbie envisions the city as a Hobbesian landscape filled with predictable prey, asserting his position as the apex predator of the mind. Sherlock's physical twitch reveals the exact moment the cabbie's psychological shrapnel breaches his armor. Sherlock's retort,
Either way, you're wasted as a cabbie.
is a subtle concession, a way to regain composure by formally acknowledging his adversary's formidable intellect. Yet, Sherlock remains utterly baffled by the lack of a traditional motive, demonstrating that his logic cannot process pure nihilism without a discernible economic or personal rationale.
The shaving foam behind your left ear. Nobody's pointed it out to you. Traces of where it's happened before, so obviously you live on your own. There's no one to tell you. But there's a photograph of children. The children's mother's been cut out of the picture. If she died, she'd still be there. Photograph's old, but the frame's new. You think of your children, but you don't get to see them. Strange father.
Cornered and desperate, Sherlock unleashes his primary weapon, hyper-observation. He launches a barrage of forensic deductions to forcibly reclaim the dominant position in the hierarchy. By surgically deconstructing the cabbie's domestic isolation and familial failures, Sherlock is actively trying to strip away the man's terrifying mystique, reducing the genius to a pathetic, lonely demographic. He is fighting for psychological survival, using data points. Sherlock continues his relentless assault on the cabbie's emotional armor, digging deeply into the trauma of estrangement and financial decay. Notably, director Paul McGuigan omits any floating on-screen graphics during this rapid-fire deduction, visually signaling that Sherlock is no longer detachedly scanning data. He is fully, dangerously immersed in the moment. He is weaponizing empathy and psychological pain to break his opponent's iron focus.
We what?
That you're a dead man walking.
So are you.
You don't have long, though. Am I right?
Sherlock finally isolates the physiological root cause, the terminal diagnosis. He attempts to reframe the killer's actions as a kamikaze murder spree, diminishing the grand game to the irrational thrashing of a dying animal. However, the cabbie's instantly chilling counter, "So are you," maintains the oppressive, lethal tension. The cabbie is entirely unfazed by the forensic dissection of his life because the impending death of both men renders past data functionally irrelevant. The confirmation of the brain aneurysm completes the transition away from the source material. The internal pressure of romantic vengeance, Jefferson Hope's aortic aneurysm, is replaced by the mental pressure of a calculating mind. The cabbie's assertion that he outlived his victims twists the horrific act of murder into a perverse, triumphant victory over his own mortality. He extracts joy not from blood, but from intellectual domination. Sherlock demonstrates a profound understanding of dark psychology, correctly identifying that mere bitterness lacks the sustained kinetic energy necessary to fuel a serial killing campaign. By recognizing love as a vicious motivator, Sherlock exhibits a deep insight into human emotion that contradicts his own claims of sociopathy. Yet, his reliance on logic hits a hard limit. He has deduced the emotional why, but cannot fathom the structural how, exposing his ignorance of modern criminal architectures.
What if I don't choose either? I could just walk out of here. I'll have the gun, please.
Sherlock attempts to break the rules of the game via a rational cost-benefit analysis. Opting for a 100% chance of a gunshot over a 50% chance of poison appears deeply irrational. However, Sherlock is aggressively testing the cabbie's psychological commitment. He gambles that the cabbie is a purist who requires the intellectual victory of the pills, knowing that a forced physical execution would ruin the game and rob the killer of his validation. Sherlock officially wins both the physical and logical confrontation. By calling the bluff and identifying the novelty lighter, he disarms the immediate threat and reasserts his perceptual dominance. His formal, dismissive exit line is a calculated attempt to completely invalidate the cabbie, stripping away his terrifying mystique and returning him to the rank of a mundane criminal awaiting processing by the mundane legal system.
Which one would you have picked, just so I know whether I could have beaten you? Come on. Play the game.
The cabbie deploys his ultimate masterstroke. Having lost the physical threat, he weaponizes Sherlock's ego. By asking for validation, just so I know if I could have beaten you, the cabbie creates an unbearable vacuum of uncertainty. He fundamentally understands that for a man afflicted with a Rubik's complex, an unsolved puzzle is vastly more agonizing than physical danger. He hooks the addict right as he turns to leave. Sherlock's slow return to the table marks a catastrophic failure of logic. He is entirely overcome by psychological compulsion. As Sherlock points to a bottle, attempting to outbluff his opponent, the cabbie bombards him with rapid-fire taunts, relentlessly attacking his vanity. The cabbie's ecstatic reaction is designed to instantly destabilize Sherlock's confidence, short-circuiting the detective's recursive logic loop.
Man like you. So clever. Well, what's the point of being clever if you can't prove it?
The cabbie strips Sherlock down to his absolute psychological core. He correctly identifies crippling boredom as Sherlock's primary existential dread. He then posits a deeply nihilistic philosophical trap. Does genius exist if it isn't exercised at the highest stakes and witnessed by an equal? The cabbie forces Sherlock to confront the terrifying reality that his entire identity is performative, and without the lethal stakes to prove his brilliance, he is nothing. He holds a pill up to the light, like he's examining it. The physical trembling of Sherlock's hand signifies the total collapse of his rationality. His vanity has entirely overridden his instinct to live. The violent explosion of the window serves as a literal and metaphorical shattering of the inescapable logic loop. The internal psychological stalemate cannot be broken through intellect. It requires an external kinetic force to violently disrupt the sterile vacuum of the classroom. The sudden influx of brutal physical reality terminates the game. The procedural of the mind is abruptly ended by raw violence. Sherlock is forcefully yanked back from the brink of self-destruction, completely disoriented by the sudden shift from high-level cognitive warfare back to visceral, bloody trauma. The climax of A Study in Pink is a masterclass in psychological deconstruction. It proves that logic, when completely divorced from humanity, is fatally vulnerable to exploitation. Sherlock Holmes survives his own vanity only through the decisive intervention of John Watson, whose violent action cements his role as the necessary, moral, and human bulwark. This gunshot initiates the lethal, transcendent loyalty of the John Locke dynamic, anchoring the volatile genius to reality. Moving forward, the power dynamic of the universe has fundamentally shifted. Sherlock realizes he is no longer hunting ordinary criminals. He is locked in a zero-sum war with James Moriarty, a rival spider at the center of a web. The cost of this realization is Sherlock's innocence. He now knows that in a postmodern world of invisible predators, knowing how a trap works is utterly useless if you do not know who set it.